the Kievan Rus, the princes, no, we're not going that far back. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit about the Ukraine and Russia. And before we get started, please like, subscribe. Let me know what's going on in the comments. If you disagree with what I have to say about this, please let me know in a dislike. I actually mentioned doing this video earlier, and somebody came across and said they really wanted to see it, and because they disagree with us helping Ukraine, or maybe they just weren't sure how I was going to recommend that we do it. And I will bring that up towards the end of this, but I'll also bring up the importance, because what most people lose sight of is that with geopolitics, they don't happen in a vacuum. You have many things that go into it, and there's many things at stake when we start talking about a country like Russia invading a country like the Ukraine, more so than what happened with just Crimea or what happened in Georgia. And I'll explain that as we go through. But like, subscribe, please. I'm back to my first love, which is actually foreign policy and economics. And I kind of gotten away from that because everything that was going on in the United States. But what I will do is, unless something major comes up, every Monday is going to be something on foreign policy or something going on somewhere else in the world. Because there's a whole big world that the United States is in and is affected by the actions, but there's not a lot of discussion about it. So I want to get back to that. Wednesdays, I will do something about the United States. This Wednesday, it'll be on Antifa and some of the ongoing things with the Chauvin trial. And then Friday, it'll probably just be an overall update. And I'll try to stick to that schedule. It'll be Monday evening, Wednesday evening, and then Friday morning. So when you're screwing off at work, you can actually pull up the video and watch it there. Now, with that being said, the Ukraine. We're going to go back through kind of some basics about the country because it'll come into play as we go through this. Currently, Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe, second only to Russia itself. It has the third largest army in Europe, behind Russia and France. So that tells you right there, the idea of an invasion is not going to be bloodless. It's going to be very ugly. And the Ukrainians have done a lot to bring their army up to a whole different level with working with Western allies. And I personally know people, I've never been to the Ukraine, but I know people who have. I have been to the region in the Baltics, in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, but I have not gone to Ukraine. And I can tell you now, if the Ukrainians are anything like the soldiers in those countries, it'll be a fight, and it'll be an ugly fight. Now, historically, I'm not going to go all the way back to the Kievan Rus. That was a joke when I was starting this, but I could if you really want me to, because I do find it very interesting. Now, the Soviets took over the Ukraine in 1919 and had control of the Ukraine until 1991, when the wall came down and the Soviet Union ended and the Russian Federation started. Now, throughout that time, once they got away from collective farming during the death of Stalin, up until collective farming started, and then once it was over, Ukraine has been known as the breadbasket of Europe. And to this day, they're one of the top exporters of grain in the world. So from an economic standpoint, there's a lot that goes into, there'd be a lot of benefits for the Russians taking over the Ukraine. And there's also a lot of benefits to trade deals with the European Union or the United States when it comes to the Russians not taking over the Ukraine. And we'll get into the economics as we go through this. 1996, they had a written constitution. They were fairly stable back and forth until Viktor Yanukovych, he was the president in 2014. And when the Ukrainians came upon hard economic times, instead of accepting loans from the European Union, he decided to go to the Russians and try to form a more closer relationship with the Russians. This led to the Orange Revolution, which overthrew him. And once he was out of power, the government that assumed power had more European and Western leanings. So they kind of got away from the Russians. When that happened, Russian separatists in the Crimea started rioting and demanding that Russia moves in and takes over the Crimea, which they did. Eventually, the people of the region voted, and they were annexed by Russia. Now, this harkens back to the story of Little Green Men. in Georgia where they said Russians were infiltrating, actual Russian military were infiltrating and working with the separatists and giving them arms. Well, what I want to say to that, and you can look at what's going on in Ukraine now and kind of see that happening, because we in the United States have special forces, which that's one of their core missions is to go into a country and train up the locals to fight the fight themselves. The Russians have the same thing in the Spetsnaz. They've trained to do this throughout the entire Cold War, and they haven't gone away once the Russian Federation stood up. And what a lot of people miss is they think of the Russian army and they think of just this huge, bulky army that just they think of the Russian army fighting the same way it did during the Cold War. And I will tell you from personal experience in the early 90s, there were Russian military officers, senior officers that came to our combat training centers, which is National Training Center, Joint Readiness Training Center, and then it was CMTC in Hohenfels. Now it's the Joint Multinational Readiness Center. And they observed our training. They saw exactly how we trained. They saw exactly how our military was set up. And they've gradually gotten away from conscripts to a lot of the units fully manned with professional soldiers. So they're not the Russian army they were in the 70s, 80s, or 90s when they were falling apart and they were underfunded and they weren't paying their people. They have a very professional army. They proved it with some of the stuff that happened in Georgia. They proved it with what happened in the Crimea. And Chechnya was an ugly war. But if you actually read some of the after action reviews that have been declassified, those units did some great things. By the same token, Ukraine in the last few years has made vast steps forward in creating a more professional army as far as arms deals, as far as equipping them and training them. And some of the reason I delayed making this video is the one step I took that I wasn't planning on taking was I actually went back and started looking at some European sources with news, and I actually got a roundtable discussion on Al Jazeera about what was going on there because I want to get that perspective too. Because if you don't know from a foreign international relations aspect, what we're fed in America by our media is very different from what you'll get looking at a European news source. Or in my case, I really like to go to Al Jazeera to get a different take than what I get from CNN or MSNBC or some of these other sources, because you get a whole different story about what's going on. Okay, as of right now, the two easternmost provinces or states in the Ukraine, they're already in negotiations to become either semi-autonomous or have more rights because the Russian separatists have taken more control. And as I said, I'm willing to bet those are seated with people like Spetsnaz who are training them and equipping them. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit, or actually I'll pull up the article because I have it here. Give me 1 second. We'll get this pulled up. Okay, here we go. As you can see, they talk about in March 2014, Russian troops took control of the Crimean region. Violence between Ukraine and Russian-backed separatist forces have claimed more than 10,300 people since 2014. The figures I heard today and over the last couple of days are actually 13,000 at this point. Now, one of the major things that has happened in July 2014, the Malaysian Airlines flight was shot down over Ukrainian airspace. The international investigation has surmised that it was a Russian-built surface-to-air missile. The reason I say surmised is evidence was interfered with, and they know evidence was interfered with. So with that, they can make assumptions, but they don't have the concrete proof. Okay, a little more recent. He talks about the military deployment of the Russian army to the Ukrainian border. Well, in several interviews I listened to today, the numbers are at 100,000 on the Ukrainian border. And they say it's a training exercise. And my question is a training exercise to invade the Ukraine? Because that's the only reason I can think of to put or 100,000 troops next to the border. If I'm right about what I suspect, and there's already Russian troops inside of Ukraine. Now, with that being said, as I said, I have access to the same information you do. I no longer have any access to secret or top secret material. I don't have any contacts that I've gone to for this. This is purely open source and surmising and thinking about the capabilities I know they have compared to the capabilities that I assume they do because they've trained them for so long. Now, we talked about the economics. The other part to look about with economics is we talked about agriculture and grain. Until 2020, there were expectations that the Ukrainian economy would grow at roughly 7% a year. Now, as I've said in other videos, when we start talking about this, it's 2020 is a bad year to judge because of COVID, and it affected every country's economy. Now, as far as coming back from that, the issue comes up with the instability of what's going on between Ukraine and Russia. Before the Crimea was annexed, there was actually exploration by Shell about natural gas resources inside of Ukraine, because currently they're one of the largest energy importers in Europe. But there's another part of that whole energy circle that comes back to why the Ukraine could be important to Russia. And that is 85% of the natural gas that Russia sends to Western Europe flows through the Ukraine. And if the Ukraine starts nationalizing some of these things based on what's going on, think about all the income that Russia would lose from that. That lost income can really not be made up for in any other way in Russia. And when we start talking about modern warfare, we have to think about fourth and fifth generational warfare, which is the hacking that's going on, the fact that at one point the Russians are suspected of completely shutting down the internet in Estonia. With that being said, economics is a huge part of it. I'm going to, next Monday, I'm going to talk about China, and we'll go even deeper into economics because there's more information out there about it. But when you start talking about affecting the economic stance of Russia, they're going to get serious. You add to that 20 years ago, Putin said his goal was to rebuild the land area of the Russian Empire under the Russian Federation. And he has been on that path. Look at what he did in Georgia. Look at what's going on in Crimea. Look at other countries he's putting pressure on. From the Russian aspect, the argument is the expansion of NATO can be dangerous for them. To a point, I can understand this. And Russia has always had a thing about having a border space. On the other hand, if they take over the Ukraine, then they're on Poland's border. Remember what happened last time Poland had Germany and Russia on its borders. If I was Polish, I wouldn't be too happy about that. But now you add to it that Poland and a couple of these other countries around there are in NATO. Ukraine is trained with NATO. They've been a NATO partner, but they're not a member state of NATO. And that's important because what I'm going to pull up right now is Article 5 in the NATO Charter. Parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. And consequently, they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in exercise of the right or individual collective self-defense recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually and in concert with other parties, such actions deemed necessary, including the use of armed force to restore and maintain security in the North Atlantic area. Now, this is important because we're about to talk about how many NATO member states there are in this area. And there's a couple of them I didn't even realize had become NATO member states. I remember them talking about it, but I did not remember them actually being accepted into NATO because there are certain requirements with that. And I'll post a link to the NATO page in the description of the video so you can take a look at it if you're interested in it. But there's far more of them than I realized until the last couple of years. Even when I was in the military, I didn't realize all the things that they had to do to become a member nation in NATO or a member state. So what I will do is, and I practice this, I'm going to do my best weatherman. And I got a whole lot of respect for them after practicing this earlier. But here's what we have. So you have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. Now that's important because they're all NATO member states. So if Russia actually invades the Ukraine and takes it over completely, that puts them on a border of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. And if nobody does anything about them taking over the Ukraine, what stops them from being tempted to moving in and trying to do the same thing in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? And I can tell you from personal experience with soldiers from those countries, that would be, yeah, they could do it, but it would be an ugly fight. Going through the Ukraine is going to be an ugly fight should they decide to do it. Now, I am not saying, since we have the official word that we are going to pull U.S. troops out of Afghanistan, I'm not saying that we leave Afghanistan and open up another war against Russia and Ukraine. I am not saying that. After 23 years and multiple combat deployments, the one thing I would like to see is our nation at peace. I would like to see young men and women not come home with nightmares and missing limbs and other issues that are brought about by what happens in combat. What I will say is we have security assistance brigades, and sending one of them or a multinational team of advisors, a large multinational team. Think about the size of USAMIDM in Saudi Arabia to advise the Saudi National Guard into the Ukraine to train their military. But what that also does is, whereas it's not enough to stop the Russians in any way, shape, or form should they decide to invade, what it does do is give them thoughts about what happens if we kill these advisors by accident in this invasion. Now, should they decide to do it anyway, then at some point they will fight the advisors coming in and argue it in the UN and in media, or they will give a warning that, yes, we're going to invade. You need to remove your advisors, because if you do not, here's what's going to happen to them. We have to do something, because if they're allowed to flow unchecked, then what's next? What happens when they actually do decide that they're going to commit an incursion inside a NATO country? Because whether it's Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania, and all those are smaller countries, they're still NATO member states, which means if there is an incursion in one of those countries, an attack on one nation is an attack on all nations. And then we're forced into a war with Russia. And no, I'm not saying this is going to go nuclear. We managed to not go nuclear from the 40s all the way up until 1991 when the Cold War ended. I'm not worried about a nuclear war. I don't want to see a war at all. I think there needs to be a peaceful resolution to this. I'm not sure what it is. My idea is just a robust multinational advisory team that can go into the Ukraine and give the Russians second thoughts about what they're willing to do. In the comments, tell me what you think about that idea. If it's good, bad, or indifferent. There's a certain major I'm looking for you to get his opinion, because he actually challenged me on it, and I'm good with that. But I do think we need to do something, and I think the more we allow Russia to move unchecked, and next Monday I'll talk about it with China, because Putin's popularity is really funny, because although he had well over 90% of the vote in the last election, and there was no discussion about it being a fraudulent election, most experts think he legitimately has that type of favorability within Russia. So if he is going to do something, he's going to do it, and the people are going to support him. So what say you in the comments? Let me know what you think. If you think Ukraine should just be a wash for us and we walk away, then that's your feeling, and that's okay. I'm not going to disagree with it, if you can give me logical reasons why. If you agree with me that Russia needs to be checked before something even worse happens, then let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. I think I've kind of figured out the keyword thing, so I'm not restricted as far as distribution of the videos. Once again, thank you for getting me over 10,000 subscribers. I'm working on some stuff for the merch shelf now. And a lot of it's going to be just kind of amusing t-shirts or coffee cups. I'm going to get them priced as low as I can. So if you actually want them, you don't have to break the bank to get them. Like I said, Wednesday will be the video on Antifa. Friday will probably be an overall update. By then, maybe we'll have decision back from the Chauvin trial. I don't know. Monday, it will be on China as far as their expansion in the South China Sea and how it affects our allies in that region and our trade partners in that region. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, please hit dislike and tell me why in the comments. With that, everybody have a good evening.